Snow still clung to the stones of Winterfell, even as the sun tried to soften the yard. The flakes made the walls look older, more stubborn, the way a scar looks deeper when you trace it with your fingers. Sansa stood in the breeze, eyes turned south. The wind smelled like wood smoke and cold iron, not like the southern air that always carried the sweet rot of warm fruit and false smiles. She did not smile. Every smile she had once owned had been used by someone else and tossed away. She kept the one she had left locked behind her teeth. A raven came before noon with a gold-sealed letter. The seal showed a lion flattened thin, pressed too hard by an impatient ring. The words inside were polite, courteous, sharp as a needle. The crown required the North to send grain as assistance for rebuilding southern granaries after their many wars. The crown required gold, or if gold was short, as it always was, then hostages, as a sign of good faith between kingdoms. The crown required Sansa to visit the capital in person, to bend her knee and show the world that winter knew its place. The paper smelled like warm wax and arrogance. Sansa kept the letter in her hand while the second raven arrived, this one with a Bravosi's thin, slanted script. The Iron Bank wrote, like a knife writes across a throat, quick, neat, no time wasted. The crown's debts had swollen again. The South promised grand things and sent copper instead of gold. "We prefer dealing with those who remember their accounts," the letter said. "We hear the North remembers." Sansa laughed then, a soft, small laugh that vanished in the cold air. She sent for her council. They gathered in the great hall. Lord Manderley with cheeks flushed from the walk, Sir Davos with a salt-stained cloak that never forgot the sea, Yara Greyjoy with hair tied back and a smirk that sat like a challenge, Lady Barbary Dustin with eyes like thin blades, Maester Wolkan with ink on his fingers. Arya came last, silent, her feet making no sound even on stone. Sansa stood before the long table and did not sit. "The South has written," she said. "They want grain and gold. If we have no gold, they will take children instead." A low growl of voices, anger tasting like metal on the tongue. Arya's hand flexed, ghosting over the place where a blade might be. "The North remembers," Manderley grunted. "We also hunger, my queen. Winter is not done with us." "I know," Sansa said, "but hunger can be a weapon. We have something the South does not. We have winter, for real. We have patience. We have long roads that break men and seas that bite. We have memory, which hurts longer than steel. We will use these." Sir Davos raised a brow. "How, my lady?" "Not with a charge," Sansa said. "Not with banners flying and men dying in neat lines to warm southern songs. I have no songs to feed them. I have ledgers." She held up 2 thin books bound in dull leather. "These are Littlefinger's accounts. He kept everything because he trusted nothing. Bribes, debts, illegitimate heirs. Quiet murders paid for in bright coins. Promises written twice in different words. The South lives in silk, but it also lives on secrets. We will make those secrets cost them their sleep, their bread, and then their blood." Yara smirked wider. "A war of letters, then? I prefer wars with fire." "Letters burn best," Sansa said, and the room shifted, a few half-smiles showing. "But you will have your fire, only not where they expect it." She walked to the map that lay on the table like a cold skin. Her finger ran along White Harbor. "Lord Manderley, you will close our grain gates to the south. No ships sail with wheat or barley without my seal, and those seals will be few. We feed our own. We stockpile. We let the South feel winter on their tongue, even when the sun bakes their courtyards." Manderley's cheeks jiggled with a slow nod. "The Merman's court is at your word." She tapped the neck. "Lady Dustin, call our friends in the swamps and the mountain clans. No southern caravan walks north-south roads without paying a toll so heavy their horses stumble. If they turn back, let them. If they press on..." Sansa's lips curved without warmth. Then the road will take them. Dustin's knife-thin smile answered, "The road is hungry." She drew her finger along the bite, and then down the fingers. "We will whisper to gulls and merchants. We will tell the Vale that the crown means to strip their minds next. We will tell the Reach that the crown plans to undercut their harvest price. We will hint that Old Town is tired of feeding. King's Landing and receives nothing back but ash." She slid the Bravosi letter forward. "I will answer the Iron Bank. They will sell us the crown's debt for a price, and I will pay it by promising them what no southern king can: deliveries on time and an honest account. When we hold their debt, we hold their breath." Does he? Davos scratched his cheek. "You'll strangle them with their own promises. A neat trick if the bank bites." "They will," Sansa said. "Banks are like wolves that read numbers. They follow the surest kill. The South has been loud and poor for too long." Arya said nothing, but her eyes were on Sansa, not unkind, not soft either. "And the fire." Sansa turned, a little breath clouding the air before her mouth. "Ships burn, warehouses burn, people panic when streets are bright at midnight, but I am not a butcher of children, and I am not my enemies." She looked at Yara. "You know the Blackwater too well." Yara's grin was a blade. "It bites back." "Good," Sansa said. "Then we will teach it where to bite back this time, not at the city. At the lifelines, at the piers that send the grain barges downriver, at the storehouses where the crown hides what tithes it steals. Fire is a letter, too, when it writes one word. No." Arya's mouth twitched. "Letters and fire. A sister's kind of war." Sansa looked at her, and in that look lay every winter night, every dark corridor, every soft voice that lured and every hard voice that cut. "We were taught by pain," she said quietly. "I will make sure it learns us back." In the Godswood, later the Heart-Tree watched with a red, weeping face while Sansa knelt. The bark under her palm was cold and wet. "Mother," she whispered, thinking of a woman with chestnut hair and a voice like a warm cloak. "Robb, father." The South took and took. They laughed when they took. I am tired of giving them my grief and calling it honor. The wind moved. Through the leaves, like an answer. Sansa stood. She no longer asked for permission from the dead. She asked for their steadiness. That evening, a southern envoy in a brocade doublet stood before her high seat and called Winterfell a stubborn stone in the road to peace. He smiled when he said it, the way a man smiles when he thinks he has made a clever joke and expects applause. Sansa's smile was mild. "Stones do not move for feet," she said. "Feet move around stones. Sometimes they slip." She offered the envoy bread and salt and let him eat his fill. She had his boots resoled at the castle's expense because courtesy is a blade that never dulls. She gave him a gift to carry, back to the capital. A wreath of pale winter roses, wrapped in a silk the color of ash. When he left, she climbed the tower with a single candle in her hand. She stood at the highest window and watched the white world breathe. She did not think of songs or crowns or throne-room whispers. She thought of roads and ships and ledgers and the slow way a frost kills a harvest when no one is looking. She thought of burning, too. Not the wild, murderous blaze that eats everything, but the clean, chosen fire that takes only what you point it at. Behind her, the candle's flame shook, then steadied. She cupped it with her palm and felt heat against her skin. "The North remembers," she said into the quiet night. "The North learns." She blew the candle out and left the tower in darkness. By dawn, ravens were already in the air, north to White Harbour, south to Bravos, west to the Iron Isles and east to the Vale. By noon, the mountain clans were closing the passes, and a merchant caravan at the neck turned back after, hearing a warning in a laughing voice that never showed a face. By dusk, A forgotten warehouse on a muddy riverbank far from the Red Keep flared up like a match struck against rough wood. The fire burned bright and then went out fast, like a message sent and received. And across the south, people lifted their heads to the wind and for a moment felt something cold brush their cheek. Winter had written its first word. Good. Let's move into part 2 of the Queen in the North who burned the South in fire and blood. The flames along the riverbank were spoken of in taverns before the embers cooled. Dockhands muttered about barrels gone missing, merchants argued in hushed tones about bandits on the river, and a Lord Steward complained loudly that his master's stores had been emptied by rats the size of men. The Crown called them accidents, the small folk called them omens, and the whispers carried faster than the smoke. The South was bleeding, and no one could see the knife. In Winterfell's hall, Sansa read each report as if it were a prayer. Her eyes followed the words with no flicker of triumph, only steady patience. Every line confirmed what she had expected. Ships turned back from White Harbor because prices had doubled. Gold slipped from Lannister hands into those of Braavosi clerks, who now counted slower and smiled sharper. Roads grew unsafe, and caravans vanished like smoke over marshes. What she set in motion had begun to walk on its own feet. Arya leaned against a cold pillar as Sansa read. "They're choking already," she said, voice quiet, as though talking about prey. "But they don't know who holds the rope." "That's the point," Sansa answered. She set the scrolls down, folding her hands atop them. "Fear works best when it has no face. Let them guess, let them point at the riverlands, at dawn, at one another. The Crown will tear its own cloak apart, searching for shadows." Davos gave a small grunt. "And when they finally look north, then they will see what I want them to see," Sansa said. "A queen who feeds her people first, who honors the old ways, who asks nothing but peace in the snow. They will... call me stubborn, unbending, cold. Let them. Cold things do not burn easily." Manderley chuckled, though unease hid behind his mirth. "A clever wolf, still. Wolves must eat. Grain prices will keep climbing if we do not loosen the gates." "Not yet," Sansa said firmly. "Let hunger chew their bellies first. Hunger makes enemies snap at one another before they look north." That night, she walked the Godswood with Arya, the air sharp with frost. "Do you ever dream of them still?" Arya asked, her breath white on the air. "Joffrey, Cersei, all of them." Sansa's voice was low. "Not dreams, shadows. Sometimes I hear Joffrey laugh when the wind slams the door. Sometimes I see Cersei's is in the glass when I look too long. But shadows can be useful." She glanced at Arya. "Do you dream?" Arya's hand brushed the hilt at her side. "Not dreams, names." They stopped before the heart tree, its face streaked red like old wounds. Sansa pressed her palm against the bark. "I used to pray for mercy," she whispered. "For peace, for an end to the wars. I thought peace meant silence, but silence is what the South gave us when they cut Father's head and called it justice. Silence is what they gave us at the Twins when they spilled our family and called it alliance. I don't pray for silence now. I pray for memory." Arya's eyes gleamed in the torchlight. "And vengeance." Sansa did not say the word, but her fingers pressed harder into the bark. By morning, a raven from King's Landing brought gilded words wrapped in threats. The hand of the king demanded audience with the Lady of Winterfell. He spoke of unity, of loyalty, of debts owed to the crown. His letter closed with a warning. The lion's claws still cut deep, even in winter. Sansa smiled when she read it. "Then we will declaw them." That same day, riders left Winterfell in silence. Some bore letters to the Vale, where young lords already muttered about southern greed. Others went to the Reach, whispering that their harvests would be seized next. Arya slipped away with no letter, no escort, only her hood and her shadow. Sansa let her go. Sometimes whispers required a sharper tongue than ink could provide. Weeks later, King's Landing began to starve. Bread riots broke out near Flea Bottom when loaves doubled in price overnight. Small folk tore carts apart looking for grain that no longer came. Dockside warehouses emptied as fast as they filled, some mysteriously ablaze, before the watch arrived. In the throne room, Cersei would have screamed. Her son, too weak, too eager to be loved, pleaded instead, pleaded with his lords, pleaded with his council, pleaded with the gods. The crown had gold, yes, but gold could not be baked into bread. And through it all, rumours spread. Rumours that the Iron Bank refused loans. Rumours that dawn looked east, not north. Rumours that a queen in the cold kept her people fed, while the south starved. Rumours that the wolf smiled while the lion coughed. Blood. At Winterfell, Sansa listened as Maester Vulcan finished reading the latest raven from the city. "The king begs your presence," he said, lowering the scroll. "They say the streets chant your name now. The people call for a queen who feeds, not a king who begs." The hall fell silent. Even Davos shifted uneasily. "That's dangerous talk," he warned. "They'll call it treason." "They already call it treason," Sansa said simply. "Let them. The North remembers, but now the South remembers too." She rose, her cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. The council watched as she crossed to the map once more. Her fingers moved south, stopping not on the neck this time, but on King's Landing itself. Hunger is a slow blade. Now we sharpen it with fire. Outside, the wind carried the howl of wolves through the dark. The first Braavosi reply came on thin paper that looked like frost. The hand was calm and tidy. It did not flatter. It did not threaten. It simply said the bank would consider transferring a portion of the crown's debt to a new creditor if that creditor proved reliable, punctual, and profit-minded. Sansa sent back numbers written in her own clean script. How much grain White Harbor could export in 2 years if allowed to. Choose the buyer. How much timber the North could cut and ship without stripping its hills bare. How many furs and iron ingots sat in storerooms right now. She added one note at the end. "We will not lie to you. We cannot afford to." "That line," Davos said, later was the hook. Wolves hunt best when they do not pretend to be sheep. 2 weeks after that, a Braavosi factor with a face like a weathered coin climbed the hill to Winterfell with a small chest chained to his wrist. He spoke good Westerosi, with no music in it. In the great hall, before Manderley, Davos, Yara, Dustin, the Maester, and half the lords who could still ride through snow, he unlocked the chest and set it on the table. Inside lay a short iron rod wrapped in blue silk. The rod had notches cut along one side. The factor explained that each notch marked a ledger page, and each ledger page marked a specific loan tied to crown revenue. "This key shows the bank trusts that when we knock," he said, "you will open." He did not smile. Sansa did not either. She held the rod and felt its weight as if it were a small sword. By the time the factor left, the Iron Bank had formally sold a slice of the crown's debt, just a slice but a sharp one, to the Treasury of the North, held at Winterfell. Notices went out in 4 languages. A copy was nailed to the doors of the Red Keep. The Boy King's councillors read it with tight mouths. The small folk could not read, but they did not need letters to understand what followed. Within days, the bank's clerks began to refuse the crown's paper chits for grain. "Pay in coin," they said, "or pay the interest first." The crown had coin, yes, but merchants smelled fear and raised prices again. Bread that had doubled, now tripled. In Flea Bottom, a child got trampled at a baker's door when a guard tried to keep the line straight with a stick. In the market, Square 3 women fought over a sack of flour until one pulled a knife and everyone lost more than flour. The gold cloaks rode through, waving pikes, and someone threw a stone that hit a captain in the cheek. He ordered his men to lash the crowd to teach them good sense. That night, a baker went to sleep and did not wake, his lips blue and his fingers curled like claws. "Bad flour," the watch said. "Old stores," the neighbors muttered. Arya washed her hands in a cistern and watched the moon ripple. She moved through the city like smoke. In one place she was a thin boy who ran messages for a scribe. In another, a pale girl who sold candles that did not drip. She listened. She traded copper for whispers. She watched a dockmaster take bribes to miscount sacks. She watched a clerk scratch out half a line so a lord would not have to pay full tithe. She watched hungry men grow brave and full men grow cruel. When she left the dockmaster's office one night, a scratching mark lay on his ledger where his name had been. The next day he was found floating near the pilings with a purse heavy enough to pull him down. People said the river had a taste for thieves. Arya did not correct them. North of the city, Yara's longships learned the river's moods like a living thing. They did not attack the city. They had no wish to invite wildfire and scorpions. Instead, they slipped into small inlets and out again like fish. They set fire to a pier that served 3 granaries and left the 4th untouched so everyone could watch the panic pour into one place. They cut cables in the dark so barges drifted loose and crashed against each other. Twice, they seized whole loads of barley and salted fish and sent the crews home with wine and a message. The North says no. It made for a good story. Sailors love a story that gives them a reason to go home alive. In the Vale, Bronze Jon Royce received Sansa's letter with a hard face. He had never liked the South much. He did not like games, and the South was nothing but games. The Vale did not declare for the North, not openly. It simply reviewed mountain patrol routes, which meant closing passes to southern levies who wished to cross on urgent royal business. Guards apologized politely and pointed to new rules signed with neat, careful hands. Behind them, the Eyrie sat like a quiet hawk. No one wanted to wake it. Inside Winterfell, Sansa did something that surprised her own lords. She called a gathering of small folk in the yard, farmers with mud on their boots, butchers with red at their cuffs, old women who had weathered more winters than most men had. Years. She stood on the steps with her hands bare in the cold, so no one would call her soft. "We are at war," she said, and her voice carried because silence went ahead of it. Not with banners and drums, with hunger and numbers. If any lord hoards grain now, if any man hides food from his neighbors to sell later at a higher price, the North itself will take his stores and give them back to the people. If any village is near starving, send a rider. You will be fed first. If any of you sells for southern coin, understand that their coin may soon be worth less than ashes. We will mint winter marks from iron. If you must trade beyond the neck, use those. They will be honored here and in Bravos. They will keep their worth because we will keep our word. Some of her lords did not like that. One whispered that it stank of small folk flattery. Another muttered about soft hands. Sansa heard them and ignored them. Later that week, she rode to a minor hall whose lord had been selling stores out the back for double price. She did not send guards. She went herself with Davos and 2 men. She stood in the man's kitchen while the cook stirred a thin soup and told him to bring the keys to his granary. When he hesitated, she looked at him until he did not dare look back. The keys shook in his hand. They took the lock off and counted. Sacks, while the man sweated. Half went to nearby villages before the snow cut the road again. The rest went to Winterfell's cellars until spring. That night, the hall's people lit candles for the queen in the north. The lord wrote a letter with ink that blotched as he cried, but no one read it. In the city, the faith saw the hunger and smelled power. A ragged septon began preaching bread before banners in a square near the river. At first, Sansa liked the words when Arya sent them north in a scrap of note. Then the songs changed. The ragged septon started calling the North Witches who had cursed the city with winter. The crowd liked that too. People want to believe that someone chose their suffering. It makes pain feel less like bad luck and more like a story where they might be heroes. The next day, the sept burned down when a cooking fire jumped in a sudden wind. No one could say how the wind found only that building. Arya walked by and watched the flames climb as if tasting the sky. Her face showed nothing, but her hand shook in her sleeve. She wrote to Sansa that night, "The city eats itself. You do not need to push, only to keep the bowls empty." The Iron Bank sent another letter with more iron rods to notch. It said, the Crown had missed a payment. It did not say what would happen next. It did not need to. Everyone under the Red Keep could hear the whisper, when the bank wants its due, it finds a way. The Boy King's Council ordered tribute wagons to gather. From the Reach and the Westerlands, the Reach sent little and late. The Westerlands sent gold, yes, but gold did not fill stomachs, and much of it turned around and walked east across the sea at the bank's call. There are many ways to lose a throne. One of them is to buy it on credit and then misplace the receipts. Sansa wore the iron key under her cloak on a plain chain. It lay heavy against her skin, like a cool promise. In the hall at dusk, with torches hissing and snow tapping at the windows, she told her council the next cut. They hoard seed grain in hidden places. We will find those places and light them from far away. Yara's eyes brightened. Davos frowned. Dockside fires take lives, he said. Then we will light them where lives are not, Sansa said. At river bends, at crossroads storehouses left half empty to fool taxmen, at private barns stuffed by greedy hands while children... Chubak, if a child dies because I burn the wrong roof, this war ends me and I accept that, so we will not burn the wrong roof. She looked at Arya's neat square letters on the table. Our eyes in the city will mark the true ones. We will send the spark and nothing more. That night she stood again in the Godswood and spoke to the still air. I do not want to be cruel, she said, and her breath drifted white and then broke apart. But I will not be kind to those who made kindness a joke. The heart tree watched and did not forgive, for trees do not forgive. They only endure. She took that as answer enough. By morning, 3 signals left Winterfell. One told Yara to bite deeper at the river's throat, one told Royce to keep the passes asleep, and one, written in Sansa's smallest hand, crossed the sea to the bank with a single line. Send word to your friends among the merchants that White Harbor pays early. The answer, when it came, felt like a door swinging wide. Ships began to whisper north, not for war, but for trade that kept its word. King's Landing watched their masts fade from the horizon and felt the quiet cruelty of being left out. The Crown sent envoys north. They came in furs they had borrowed, not owned, with faces pinched from cold and pride. They brought letters sealed in red wax, stamped by the Boy King's ring, though the words inside were too sharp for his hand. The letters spoke of loyalty, of honor, of oaths sworn at Harrenhal and broken at the Twins. They reminded the North that the Iron Throne was forged from dragon's fire and could still command obedience if tested. Sansa had the envoys seated in the hall, given bread and salt, and then left to wait 3 hours before she entered. She walked in slowly, cloak trailing white across the stone. She took her chair at the head of the table and did not smile. The envoys read their letters with stiff voices. When they finished, Sansa asked a simple question. How many loaves did you see in Flea Bottom last week? The men shifted uncomfortably. One stammered, The Crown provides... No, Sansa said, her voice cutting like thin ice. The Crown demands. It does not provide. She leaned forward. You ask for my grain, my gold, my loyalty. But tell me, where was your loyalty when my father's head fell? Where was your honor when my mother's throat was cut at a feast you blessed with bread and salt? The South broke the table first. Do not be shocked that the North no longer eats from it. The envoys had no answer. They left with courtesy, in their mouths and fear in their eyes. Sansa gave them a gift for their king, another wreath of pale winter roses, this time wrapped in cloth dyed black with soot. By the time they returned, King's Landing was bleeding worse. Flea Bottom boiled, over into full riot. The gold cloaks killed dozens, maybe hundreds, to keep the streets from reaching the Red Keep. Merchants shuttered their shops and fled inland. The faith sent new preachers, this time more careful with their words, sermons about patience, about duty, about the gods rewarding those who obeyed their king. No one listened. Hungry people do not bow to gods who do not feed them. In the throne room, lords shouted at each other until the boy king wept. The Lannister gold kept flowing, but it bought less each day. Grain rotted on the way from the Reach. When roads mysteriously flooded or bridges broke, caravans from the west vanished into the Neck, their wagons stripped bare. When the council demanded the Vale open its passes, Lord Royce wrote a polite refusal. "Snow makes the mountains dangerous. We dare not risk our men." Inside the Red Keep, whispers grew sharper. Some said the boy should put aside his crown for a regent stronger in hand. Some said the faith should guide the throne. Some said the North should be appeased at any cost. Some said the North should be crushed at any cost. But none agreed who should pay for it. And then the first plague cart rolled through Flea Bottom. It was not plague, not truly. It was hunger made visible. Thin bodies stacked like firewood, children with eyes too large for their faces, old men curled like paper. The cartwheels squealed as they rolled up the hill toward the sept for burial. People spat at the gold cloaks who marched beside it. Someone threw dung at their captain. He drew his sword. He did not sheath it. When Arya wrote the news to Sansa, she described it in 2 words: they break. Winterfell's council met in silence after hearing it. Manderly whispered, "If the city falls, the South will blame us." "They already blame us?" Sansa said. She looked at the map, her finger tracing rivers like veins. Blame is wind, grain is stone, stones build kingdoms, winds only howl. Yara tapped the table. "You've cut their stomachs, cut their throat next." Sansa shook her head. "Not yet. If we march now, the South will unite out of fear. Better to let them tear each other apart first. Lions claw lions when meat grows scarce." Arya returned at last, stood in the shadows of the hall. "Cersei would have burned the city by now," she said. Sansa met her sister's eyes. "I am not Cersei. I do not burn for pleasure. I burn for purpose." That night, she walked alone to the highest tower and looked south. The wind bit her cheeks raw, but she stayed. She thought of father's voice telling her once that the North was not cruel, only honest. She thought of mother's hands, always sewing, always mending. She thought of Rob's laugh, of Bran's stories, of Rickon's wild runs, of Arya's sharp eyes watching her even now, of Jon, wherever he was, fighting his own wars. She thought of them and of herself. A girl who once dreamed of songs and nights, now planning hunger and fire with her own hands. Below, in the yard, wolves howled into the dark. She whispered back, "Not yet, but soon." And in King's Landing the smell of smoke lingered even when no fire burned. Winter did not need snow to make itself felt. It arrived in King's Landing as a taste in the mouth and a sound in the streets, the taste of old flour and the sound of feet that had learned to hurry only when bread appeared. The carts still rolled, but slower, and the men pushing them had the eyes of cattle led to a thin field. The faith rang its bells more often, and the bells sounded like hunger wearing a mask of holiness. A rumor walked ahead of every bell. The North had stolen the city's stomach, and the crown could not win it back. Sansa read the latest letters with steady hands, while the fire snapped in the hall. Arya's script was tight and small. They queue at dawn for a loaf that does not come. The Goldcloaks open bakeries with pikes and find empty racks. A captain sold his boots to buy oats. The boy king hides behind curtains while his mother's friends argue about who should be blamed loudly enough to be safe. Davos laid another scroll beside it, fresh from White Harbor. "Ships ready," he said. "Manderly's men have packed. Black bread tight as stones. If we leave now, we can ride the tides and be at the Blackwater's mouth in 5 nights. Yara leaned forward, hunger in her grin. And then Sansa looked at the ink where Arya's words ended. She saw not letters, but faces. Boys with knobby wrists, women thin from giving their share away, men who had learned to lower their eyes. Then we feed them. The room shifted. Manderley puffed, half a cough, half a protest. Feed the enemy. Feed the starving, Sansa said. Feed them in our name where the crown has failed in its own. Not enough to make them strong. Enough to make them see every loaf stamped with the direwolf, every sack tied with grey ribbon. We do not sneak, we do not boast, we simply do what their king cannot. And we ask for one thing in return. Davos's stare was searching. What price? Order, Sansa said. Lines that hold. No rioting at the river, no knives. We choose the gate, we choose the hour. We choose who handles the bread. If the watch wants their rations, they keep the peace. If they cannot keep it, they do not eat. She looked at Yara. You hold the water outside. No ship that flies a lion passes without your leave. If the wildfire men twitch, you slip away and laugh at them from farther out. If they throw chains, you cut them. If they send fire arrows, you let the wind be your shield, and then you come back when they are tired and ashamed. Yara's grin softened into respect. A queen of knives and loaves. Both cut, Sansa said. Then she turned to Davos. You will go with them. I need your old tricks and your honest face. Find me a captain in the watch who has more stomach than pride. Pay him in bread and in a promise. If he keeps the river gate calm, his men will eat every 3rd night, and their families will not be forgotten. He will not wear our colours. He will not speak our names. He will simply do his job. Braavos answered. On the 3rd day, with words as dry as salted fish, the bank had attached liens to 3 Lannister ships now docked in the free cities. Any cargo they carried would be seized if Crown interest was not paid in full by the next moon. Sansa sent a polite note of thanks with a list of northern exports due in spring and a second list of names copied from Littlefinger's books. Southern lords whose private arrangements with the Crown would embarrass them if written on sept doors. She did not send those to the bank. She sent them to the Reach and the Stormlands with a gentle line. Your honour is being spent without your consent. If you wish to keep it, close your barns and stay home. The replies did not arrive, but the roads did grow emptier. When the moon turned, Yara's longships appeared off the Blackwater like a dark rumour that refused to leave. They did not come in boldly. They hovered where the river meets the sea and sent skiffs to scout the tide. On deck, Davos taught boys from White Harbour how to read the shore by smell. He wrote a note with a charcoal stub and a board for a desk, and paid a boy with quick legs to carry it to the river gate at dusk. The note did not threaten. It offered, order for bread. Hold the line, and the wolf will feed. Break the line, and the wolf will leave. The first night no gate opened. The second, a plank door at the river's edge, creaked at midnight. A sergeant with a scab on his cheek and church dust on his boots stepped out with 10 men who looked like they had forgotten sleep. He said nothing. Davos said nothing either. He gestured to the skiffs, and sacks came up in quiet arms. Each sack, tied in grey, each loaf stamped in the crust with a small direwolf from a hot iron. The sergeant stared at the mark a long time and then nodded once, as if agreeing with himself. The men carried the sacks to the square and set them down in lines. Davos and 2 of Manderley's lads walked the queue and counted under their breath to make sure each family got 1 loaf and 1 only. A child reached for a second, and his mother slapped his hand and then kissed his head and cried, because she could still teach him a rule. At the end, the sergeant took a sack for his men. He did not thank anyone. He did not have to. He kept the peace, and that was thanks given back. By dawn, the story had already grown teeth. The city whispered that the wolf had fed the people while the crown slept. Some made a prayer of it, keep the wolf's bread coming. Some spat and called it treason to eat from northern hands, but their voices sounded thin, like men trying to sing with empty bellies. The boy king's counsel was loud instead. They shouted about insolence, about humiliation, about arresting any watchman who touched a northern sack. They sent orders down the hill. The orders were read and folded and put away. That night the gate opened again. Sansa waited in Winterfell, with a patience that felt like iron on her tongue. She did not pace, she worked, she sent more iron to Braavos. She checked the tallies of oats and black bread and salt fish and ordered more ovens built at White Harbour. She met 3 petty lords who had sold at double price and took their grain into her care with a look that made them wish she had taken their tongues instead. She wrote to the clans and told them to ease their tolls on the river roads so the story would spread faster. Let them talk of our bread, she said. Truth travels best on a full stomach. On the 4th night, Arya wrote again. A captain in the watch has turned his cloak without turning it. He keeps the river gate quiet and looks away at the right hours. He has a wife with a baby who sleeps with one hand clenched. He will not betray you if you do not betray the babies. Sleep. Sansa pressed her lips together and breathed out slow. She wrote back, give him nothing with our name on it. Give him a token of iron scratched with a wolf and a number. He can show it to a White Harbour clerk in the spring for a real wage. No one else needs to know. The faith tried to spoil it. A new preacher stood near the gate and called the northern bread witch loaves. He said wolves had cursed the flour to make men weak. He said the gods would strike anyone who ate. People listened because fear is a habit and they were used to it. Then a grandmother with a spine like a spear stepped out of line, broke a loaf, ate it slow in front of everyone, and did not fall dead. She even smiled. If the gods burn me, she said, they can stand in my kitchen first and show me how to bake. The crowd laughed, low and rough like wood smouldering. The preacher vanished before noon. Sansa's boldest cut came not with bread, but with paper. She sent a letter south addressed to no one and everyone, and she paid street criers with clean voices to speak it in the squares. It was simple. The North does not seek your thrones or your taxes. We seek your lives whole. Keep order at the river gate and the bread comes. Arm children in the line and it stops. Raise a hand to the bakers and it stops. The crown may command your fear. We ask only your patience. Choose which feeds you. The words did not sound like war. They sounded like a bargain. People understand. Bargains. The crown tried to drown them with new laws and new lashings. Laws are loud. Hunger is louder. By the week's end, 3 things happened in one day. A Lannister galleon Braavos had its sails cut away by clerks with knives, and the captain was forced to borrow money from the same men who had shamed him. In the Reach, a lord sent a secret raven north, offering to sell Sansa seed at cost, if she would promise to say his name kindly when the songs were made. And in the Red Keep, the boy king screamed at a map and tore it until his fingers bled, because no matter how loudly he shouted, the city still stood in the bread lines at the hour the wolf had chosen. That night, the river gate opened early. The sergeant with the scab wore a new scar above his brow. He told Davos quietly that his captain had been arrested for consorting with northern smugglers, and then he looked at the sacks and did not ask if more were coming. He knew. Davos gave him a token of iron scratched with a wolf and the number 3. For 3 shifts, Davos said. For 3 nights the line did not break. The baby can sleep easier. When the skiffs pushed off, a small thing happened that felt large. A girl broke a loaf and stared at the crust where the direwolf mark had stamped deep. She tucked the piece with the mark into her sleeve and ate the rest. Later, she nailed that crust above her door like a charm against bad luck. Neighbors saw and copied her. It was a silly thing, a bit of bread going hard on a nail. But when The sun rose. A lane in Flea Bottom looked like a forest of tiny grey banners. Arya walked that lane and kept her hood up and let herself smile where no one would notice. She wrote north. They are choosing. Sansa read the line twice and closed her eyes. She did not weep, and she did not cheer. She reached for the iron key on her chain and felt its cool weight and thought of another key she needed now, the one that opened the city's heart wider than the river gate. "Not yet," she whispered to the quiet hall. "But soon." King's Landing had stopped listening to its king. The boy still wore the crown, still sat on the Iron Throne, still spoke with trembling voice in a hall that echoed too loudly, but the streets had chosen another master. They queued at the river gate, not the sept. They cursed or prayed by the wolf's breadmark, not by the king's decree. Even the gold cloaks had learned to stand straighter when the sacks arrived, for their wives and children ate from them, too. The crown tried everything, new decrees, death for anyone who smuggles northern goods. New sermons, the 7 despise false bread. New punishments, lashings in the square, gallows set high. But hunger dulls fear. Mothers dragged their sons out of the stocks, neighbors tore down signs, and even the lashers struck half-heartedly, their own bellies groaning louder than the crowds, and through it all the wolf fed. Not enough to sate, but enough to keep hope alive. Hope is sharper than steel when wielded against a throne built on fear. Sansa knew the end was near when the Iron Bank sent her a letter with no politeness at all. Just 4 words. The crown has defaulted. That was not a message, it was a death sentence. No ship in Essos would carry a Lannister seal now without charging twice its worth. No mercenary captain would take a royal coin. No loan would be written without interest, so high it cut before it healed. The bank would not fight with swords. They would let the debt rot the crown from inside, and Sansa had already salted the wound. In Winterfell's hall, her council argued for the march. Manderley thumped the table. They are on their knees. Now is the time. Yara snarled, "A wolf that only feeds will be mistaken for a sheep. We must strike." Even Davos leaned forward, eyes uneasy. "The city waits for someone to take it, my queen. If not you, then another." Sansa sat very still. She looked at Arya, who said nothing, only watched with eyes that saw deeper than any map. Then Sansa rose. "We will not march. The North does not beg for thrones. The South will fall to its own weight, and when it does, the people will already know who kept them alive." She turned her gaze across the table, steady as frost. "We do not need to conquer. We only need to endure." It was not a warrior's answer, but it was the North's. The end came not with banners, but with fire. A warehouse near the Red. Keep went up in flames one night, taking 3 granaries with it. The fire leapt street to street until half the hill glowed red. By dawn, the flames had died, but the screams had not. Hundreds were dead, thousands homeless. The boy king wept in the throne room, while his council shouted. The small folk marched, not with torches, not with songs, but with empty hands raised high. They filled the square before the gates and cried one word until their throats bled. "Bread!" When no bread came, stones followed, then knives. The gold cloaks held as long as they could, but half their ranks slipped away when the gates of the river opened and northern sacks came through like salvation. The sergeant with the scar led them, and for the first time he shouted the truth in daylight, "The wolf feeds!" That broke the city more surely than any siege tower. Crown loyalists fled. The boy king was spirited away by a few desperate knights who swore the gods would yet save them. The Red Keep's doors shut, but no one cared. The city had already crowned another power in their hearts. They lined the streets with bread crusts nailed above doors. They drew direwolves in ash on the walls. And when a southern lord tried to shout treason, the crowd drowned him with laughter that had no joy in it, only release. News rode north faster than any raven. By the time Sansa heard it, she was standing in the Godswood. her hand on the heart. Tree. Vulcan read the message with a voice that trembled. The people of King's Landing cry for the wolf. They say the boy is gone. They say the city belongs to you. Her council erupted, shouts of triumph, of fear, of plans for marches, and banners. But Sansa did not speak. She stood beneath the red leaves, listening to the wind move like a whisper through the branches. At last, she turned. "The North remembers," she said, voice low but carrying. "We remember the dead. We remember the lies. And now the South remembers too. They are not mine, they are their own, but they know the wolf feeds when the lion only devours. That is enough." Arya stepped from the shadows. "So you won't take their throne?" Sansa looked at her sister, her eyes calm as deep snow. "I don't need their throne. Thrones burn, bread feeds. Let them keep their ashes. I will keep the North." And so it ended, not with a sword raised high, but with a quiet truth. Vengeance had come, not in rivers of blood, but in the slow fire of hunger, in the patient memory of a wolf who learned from pain and turned it into power. The South bent without battle. The lion's roar was gone, and the Queen in the North stood tall, not in King's Landing, but in Winterfell, her vengeance colder, sharper, and more enduring than fire itself. The North had remembered, and through Sansa the North had its vengeance.